Hi everyone. In case you are joining for the first time, my name is Sarah Otisi. I'm an agri-tourist and an agro-educator. I'm passionate about exploring sustainable agricultural practices, traditional farming system, and rural communities to learn and share their unique agricultural stories. I welcome you all to my channel, Agro Explore. On this channel, you'll be learning a lot about farming, indigenous food, agritourism, and so on. There is a lot to learn on this platform, and I hope you stick to this channel to see everything I have to offer. Last month, I visited the Netherlands on agritourism, and I will say that that is the biggest adventure I have ever taken in the journey of my agritourism. Traveling from Budapest, Hungary to Netherlands to explore agricultural sites and learn a couple of things is the biggest risk I have taken ever, but I'm happy that it turned out well. You know that saying that if you don't step out of your comfort zone, or if you don't do something challenging, you don't know what the end result will be, something like that. So I'm happy that I took that risk and that I was brave enough to have traveled. Though I spent just a few days in the Netherlands, I was not able to cover a lot of things that I really wanted to cover, but it was indeed a memorable one and a lovely experience. During my stay in the Netherlands, I was hosted by a family. Mr. Xander and his family hosted me, where I had the opportunity to experience what it feels like living on the farm. They are into dairy farming, where they have lots of cows. I'll still post the video, so watch out for that video on dairy farming. So while I was there in the Netherlands, I had an interview with Mr. Xander because he is a resourceful person that has a lot to offer. You can learn a couple of things from him. He is involved in a lot of initiative in the agricultural space, starting from Waters Forum, the Food Lab, his own initiative, Eye for Nature. So there is a lot to learn from him, and I would like you to sit tight and listen to the interview, because I know that you have something to learn from there and you will be motivated to do something from your comfort zone. Mr. Xander, can you tell us more about yourself and what you do in your dairy farm?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sending the invite to be part of your tour, your Agri Explorer tour. And it's been amazing to have you and to spend, we're going to spend some time together. You're welcome here at the dairy farm of, we call it Our Landscape, which is the English translation of Onze Ruimte. And we have cows here in the southwest of the Netherlands called the Albasserwaard, where I think over 400 dairy farmers are, because we have soil quality calling peat or clay on peat, which only suits actually for grass growing, which cows like. So that's a little bit of the landscape we are here. I never thought of being a farmer practically myself. I did study agriculture engineering in Wageningen, but I actually started working at the Ministry of Agriculture, but not through a professional career, but through the love of life. I met a farmer, which I married. We have two small kids now, Jasmine of 4 and Savi of 1. And we chose 6 years ago, bring our lives to the farm and make the future of the farm. Farm was initiated by the family of my wife. We are the third generation taking over. And my parents-in-law, who we also work with in the farm with the 4 of us, we're always working on dairy production, and we want to focus more on other stuff as well, which resonates with the talents we bring in and also the passion, the energy we get from not just growing cows who produce dairy, but also to look at what kind of value the whole landscape than just the cows bring. So the land we work with, the nature, the bird conservation, we want to bring a lot of more other food production to the farm than just the dairy, which will be much smaller than the dairy, but we're looking at agroforestry, for example, a little bit of horticulture, and maybe other stuff we don't know yet. But next to that, we want to work on knowledge exchange. So we think the landscape of a farm is an amazing learning landscape to learn about food production, but also about energy, about biodiversity, about water challenges, etc. And we are already part of a regional and also international campus. We want to focus next to those points on leadership development, because we think when people are in an environment like this, which is close to nature with animals, it helps them to lead themselves. And the last point we hope to realize is a bit of activity on a healthy lifestyle. So being close to nature, working with food, which is next to oxygen necessity for life. We want to make people aware of, okay, what's the quality of food, but also what does it mean when you put it in your mouth, and how does it make you feel? How does it help you to make you feel good and vital? So that's also what we're doing. So it's going from one branch to 4 branches we hope to develop in coming years, which also means that our other jobs we do, like I facilitate an organization called I for Nature, and other foundations, etc., that they can be hosted on this landscape. And my wife also can bring her job to the farm.
Okay. How has the farming tradition in this region shaped your daily life?
It's a two-way answer, as in I just have been here for 6 years, which is a long time, but I still feel sometimes like a tourist. So all the cultural or traditional elements that are alive in this region, specific for this region, might not all know yet. But being on a farm, work is there 24/7. Sometimes people come to the farm and they say, oh, you work so hard, but you'll be happy when it's weekends. So no, the cows still need food in the weekend. The work continues. And Christmas, holidays. So taking care of animals is something you do 24/7. So you have to adapt your social, private life totally to the farm. So that shapes everything you do. I personally, but my wife and me also have the luxury that my parents-in-law do still a lot of work. So they give us the luxury that we can still go out of the farm or, for example, to other countries, but more and more we have to be here on the farm or make sure that there's someone on the farm to manage everything, because nothing is predictable on a farm. So you have to be prepared for everything. Nature is in control. So you have to surrender to that. Like, for example, now the wind is really, really fierce. So we need to take care that everything stays to lie where it is, that nothing goes away, that the animals are okay, adapt the shed, etc. So yeah, we can do that with the 4 of us, but then it's a lot of work, but it's fun to do.
Can you share with me a memory of a turning point in your farm? This can have to do with like expansion or anything memorable about the farm.
When you give the farm into the hands of a new generation, which is for my parents-in-law important turn, because they're slowly letting go of something they built up for years and which they inherited from their parents. So that's a very special dynamic in a company. You have family companies, but in a farm, this is you experience that very intense. This brings also tension in the positive, but also in a less positive way, because we want to make different choices, maybe than my parents-in-law did. So what we think is an interesting idea, they might not think or do think it's a good idea. So that's a very memorable process, because it's not just a moment. And funny that you say expansion, and yes, we're expanding, but we're expanding in a diversified way. So we made a choice, my wife and me, that we don't want to expand production-wise.
Okay.
This has several reasons. One of them is we are farming in the Netherlands, where expansion is a very big challenge at this moment because of the policy framework, about the discussion about having animals in general. There's a lot of protest or criticism about having cows or keeping animals on a farm, which not always makes it a happy job or something you share on a birthday. And on the other side, there's a lot of sustainability measurements that we would not be able to overcome if you want to expand. So expand means more kilograms of milk, more cows. Because in the Netherlands, one thing we know for sure is that we have to extensify, which means that if we want to keep more cows and produce more milk, we also have to have more land and all sorts of indicators we keep track of regarding nitrogen exposure or ammonia exposure. So it also brings a lot of costs extra, or a lot of challenges legally wise, or people who don't like that in your area, which we don't want to. So we think we can get more margin, more value out of keeping the same amount of production roughly than growing, because expansion used to be the dynamic, you have to expand or else you don't survive financially.
You mentioned that you have been on the farm for 6 years.
Yeah.
Can you share with me the challenges you have encountered as a dairy farmer, and how did you navigate these challenges? How did you try to solve these challenges that you faced as a dairy farmer?
Yeah. So the last 6 years have been, for me, a really practical experience, intense practical experience. And still, I'm not the one 24/7 doing the work. That's other people doing that with us. But I've been in farming practically from policy arenas, from corporate point of view since I was 12. So it's quite a long time. So I know from all that sides a little bit, but because it's not just the practical challenge you find out, it's rules and regulations, welcome in Europe and in the Netherlands, you have to abide to. So one of them, which brings a very important challenge on the farm, is that European legislation doesn't allow us as Dutch farmers anymore to put more nitrogen, mainly nitrogen or manure on the lands. Because for years we have been getting an exception from European law, so we can put more manure on the land than was prescribed through the regulations. And now what Court of Law had said we can't do that anymore, which means we need to get rid of more manure than we did. So you need more land to do that, because the amount of manure you can put on land is the same, or even less maybe in the regulations for the coming years. So that means we have to get rid of manure, which we don't get paid for. You have to pay to do that. So which is interesting because it's nutrients, which in other parts of the world they need the nutrients. So it's a lot of money. You have to think of the coming years. We have to pay for like 10, 20, 30, 40,000 euros to get rid of manure because of this regulation change. We didn't grow with the milk production, etc. a little bit, but not as much. So that's a policy one you get to deal with direct. And for the Netherlands, we are very strict on how we use the land, because in comparison to huge continents like Africa, we have lots of less land. And we have canals in our land. So most paddocks, most pens are surrounded on 4 sides with small canals. And one of the things we need to deal with is that European law says that we need to keep away from those canals like 1 or 2 meters, depending on the kind of land, from mowing. So we're not able to use that land to harvest the grass. But if you count that for 4 sides in every piece of land, that's a lot of land you're going to lose. So that's something all of a sudden we need to adapt to. So the higher goal is to get more biodiversity on your land, etc. But that's something you need to deal with. So if you count all the pieces of land you have and all those buffer strokes less, I think maybe even we have 2 hectares or 1 hectare less land where we can get our production from. So you need to deal with that. You need to literally adapt your practices, so you can't mow with the tractor that close to the canal because you will get a fine. That's something you need to get into your system again. And this is what it's the Dutch challenge. This changes a lot. So it's also very hard to predict where you want to invest in, what's your strategy, because if everything is changing all the time, it's very hard.
I'm curious to know how you manage the balance between farming and protecting the unique landscape.
Some people say if you cross the line, you know where the line is. So also when you get in disbalance, you know where to find the balance. So I think one way we keep in the balance is that we keep moving, keep trying to adjust, keep thinking what you can do better or smarter. What I mean with keep moving, that you're not very strict on, okay, we can't do anything wrong. Just keep trying new things, keep trying, oh, let's see how it works tomorrow. Because I think if you are very strict, it has to be this way and it has to work out tomorrow like that, you will mentally be very stressful and it will be very hard to succeed. And I think it's with a job that's so close to nature, with the climate change that's surrounding us, or it's very hard to put the screws on the thumbs of nature, as in she has her own will. So you have to surrender a little bit to the fact that not everything's going to go the way you think it is. So that's why I think you can mentally keep the balance, but also from a company point of view. And if you're able to put in other leadership styles, other open for new methods or new techniques, you're able to balance it. But if you only have a handbook, I want to have it this way, and your surrounding is changing, then it's very stressful to keep it that way.
Yeah.
So you have to have a little bit of balance or flexibility in your mentality, in your mindset.
How do you work with schools, youth, and tourists to pass on farming knowledge?
One of my personal beliefs, and I'm very glad that my wife and my parents-in-law also embraced that more and more, is that young people these days bring the developments that's going on in the world, because I don't have them in my mind or in the scope that I've learned. So I need to learn from young people. So it's passing on the knowledge and skills we have, but also getting the new developments from them, because the world in 2025 is not arranged or it's not running the way we think, okay, we need to learn what we've learned from the past and pass it on to the new generation, because the world is so changing and catching up on a generation like me so fast. For example, the development of AI at this moment, I haven't been taught that. The young people grow up, they adapt to it, and they use it much better than I do. So basically, I think we should put everybody in their own strength and use their talents, and then I think we're making the best of it. So why should I try to grasp what AI is when a young person really gets it and we combine the talent? So that's a big motivation why we want to work with young people, and young people you can easily find in education. So one of the ambitions is that I wanted to connect to education. So we work with a vocational training institute, a school here where young people learn skills for farming, but also other elements in rural areas, but also about healthcare. And we want to offer them the landscape of a farm to learn, which is unknown for them. The value proposition is that they bring us inspiration and knowledge about the ideas that they think are necessary for a farm like us that we didn't know or didn't expect. And it turned out into a cooperation now that we form a campus. So our farm landscape is going to be part of a polder campus. Polder is a very Dutch word with them, but also internationally. As we look to farming in the Netherlands, it's not the only way, and we've proven to be very good at some stuff in the past. And on the other side, the work we do with milk, the value chain we operate in, is not just stopping on the Dutch border. So it's a big market. So if something goes on in India around dairy on milk, we will have to learn the effects of it. So you can't just deal with the national ones, so you have to keep track of developments in other countries and learn about farming there, and they can learn from us. So it is something that you have to be busy with all day long.
Having had the opportunity to travel to Nigeria, what can you say the people in Netherlands can learn from the African concept of farming, and what can African farmers learn from Netherlands farmers? Do you think there is need for knowledge exchange in these two regions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the assumption is usually from a traditional point of view that people would think, okay, Dutch or European farmers should teach the rest of the world, as arrogant we might have come. And from the past, I think there's a great message in there. We've learned how to be cost effective, how we can do high production, but also within circumstances, for example, climate, political conditions, etc. This is not one-on-one to be able to be copied to Nigerian situation or South American or whatever. But yes, we could share knowledge about that. At the other side, we are dealing with climate change, with dry periods, very wet periods, etc. There's a lot of experience, maybe not for the best reasons, but for example, in Nigeria, how do you deal with very dry circumstances or wet? That's something we could learn from each other, which is needed. But the much more important aspect, I think, is we just shared some experience on the importance of mental robustness, resilience, maybe agility. I think in Nigeria or for more countries in Africa as well, how do you lead yourself? How do you lead yourself within a community? How do you support and position yourself being a farmer within a community? I think something in Nigeria is much more positioned. How do you deal with that? And how you go back to the basic feeling of being a human being. You need to deal with natural circumstances and the basic things in life. I think in the Netherlands, we are so used on luxury, not luxury as in expensive cars, for example, but everything is here, the knowledge, the technology, the universities, the companies. So we forget about to take care of ourselves. And in the end, it's the people who has to do the work on a farm as well. How do you keep yourself energized? How do you deal with your neighbors, which is a big challenge in the Netherlands because we've been very self-centered and we have, as farmers as well, very into the farm away from your surroundings. And I think what I see and saw in Nigeria is that everybody is well connected. Everybody is open to be in dialogue with each other. And of course, there's some people also knocking each other's heads in, but mainly I think that the community life and the symbiotic life, which I saw in rural areas, there's much more harmony there as I've seen it. And of course, you can talk about sustainability or something, but living close to nature is something I think in general in rural areas in Nigeria is much more common. And here, we don't appreciate as much that we have the great landscape and the biodiversity. So it has to go both ways. And one of the statements I've learned, this is not particularly from Nigeria, but I like also dynamic and community life and spirit in what you do. Somebody told me two sentences. One of them starts with rhythm in Africa, which I like. In Netherlands, we can be very factual and boring. You have to have a gut feeling with each other, which also brings joy
and happiness.
Yeah, maybe one of the biggest challenges of European countries is we need to look at a way of working that everybody can be winning. And I think that's something a little bit more, depending maybe on the region, but a little bit more rooted in Nigeria or in African countries. Like Mandela said, you can go fast, but together we can go further.
Yeah.
And that's something really missing in the DNA in the Netherlands or Europe.
Interesting. It's good to hear about your experience about Nigeria and what you've highlighted about community. I think is really key, not just for farmers, but for daily living. There is a need for connection. You have to connect with the people because to some extent, this can bring relief, make work much easier, and also bring a kind of a satisfaction to you as a person. And as a farmer, there is also need for farmers to have this connection and this network within them because as a farmer, I don't think you can do it alone. You need to reach out to other farmers to know what they are doing right and what you need to do right in your own farm as well. So I really agree with you that there is need for more connection and more community-based kind of living in this part of the world. And also in the African region, we also need the knowledge base and the technology here in the European countries like the Netherlands. We need a transfer of knowledge and technical skills to do better on our own farming landscape.
Yeah, they usually say you have the hard skills and the soft skills. So the more people or behavior focused skills is something that's in general, I think, totally underestimated. In society, might be getting philosophical, but when people on their hopefully high age dying beds, they hardly say something like, okay, I'm so glad I have so much money. They almost, I hope everyone thinks about the people they're going to miss or that they love, etc. So it is about people. And it's like what you say, it is about the community. I don't think it's just farmers, but everybody needs an ecosystem around. We need that people relation. We need that community to thrive. And that's something I think is more rooted in African countries than in European.
I would also like to ask a question on your hope for the next generation of farmers.
My hope, but also I think conviction about future farming, partially because that's why I started studying and working in the field, is they could be, and I think they will be, the saviors for climate change. As in, farmers and farming is a job that's so close to nature and depending on nature, which is very hard to compare with a lot of, or any other job maybe. And it's been criticized a lot, and I partially totally agree, which is not being embraced by a lot of other farmers as I say this, but in a solution kind of way, if you talk about making soils more healthy, regenerating soils, which makes a lot of contribution to green growth, regreening desertified areas, which brings these cycles of nature, of water, etc., which will eventually cool down the planet, bring back prosperity. Yeah, I think this is the magic that farmers can bring. But not if they keep in the same system and keep themselves enclosed in the same system as where they are now.
Interesting. So, in your own idea or your own opinion, do you think that sustainability in food production can go a long way to solve lots of problems?
I think sustainability can contribute to reduction of damage of problems. And again, this is food for professors. I don't really care a lot about definitions, but I've been taught about sustainability. It's correcting. This is also what regeneration is about. We should regenerate. So if I would be a language professor, I would say we should start working generatively so that you work in a way that the earth or nature is going to provide you with the potential it has. And sustainability now, I think, is much more focused on the fact that we should do damage control. So yes, it's in the direction of solving our problems, but I think it's not taking on our challenges.
So from what I've seen so far here in the Netherlands, when driving on the road, you see lots of windmills. Can you tell me how these windmills contribute to farming, or does it contribute to farming?
I think like many elements around sustainability, it's a paradox, and it also it brings us, from my philosophy, back to that we need cooperation, communities moving, and not just people, because it's a paradox. It means it will never be a constant truth or not being the truth. A windmill does contribute to sustainable farming or the relation of that farmer with his surroundings, because it reduces, of course, the use of fossil fuels. But yes, it contributes. But for every positive contribution, there's always nearly anything to say negative. So yes, it contributes to sustainable energy production, but at the same time, it causes death of a lot of birds flying by. It causes risks for airplanes, causes annoyance, and it contributes to reducing fossil fuel use. But then at the same time, the Chinese are producing coal with energy. So I think in generally you should think of with the positive and the negative. Do we end up positive? Then it's okay. If you think it just has to be positive, it's a no-go, because there's hardly any things you can find that only are positive. Yes, there's a lot of windmills in the Netherlands, but if you look at the total energy use at this moment, the Netherlands is in the bottom list of European or Western countries of being sustainable in general for the energy use we have, the production. And at the same time, we put a windmill, a new data center of Google or Microsoft is being built in the Netherlands, who use a lot more energy, which is not sustainable. And all these data centers are heating up. So they're also contributing to heating up our planet. That's not in balance. So we need loads of more sustainable energy or windmills to do that. So if you look a little bit holistic, which is a nice word of taking into account everything, it's not very positive. It's like drop on the hot plate, they say in the Netherlands. So we have to embrace this positive development.
Yeah.
But for me, it's always there's more potential to do more. So let's do it.
The second to the last question I have is, how do you think agritourism can help in regional development and in sustainability of agricultural practices?
I think agritourism can contribute to prosperity or the future of a region very much, because I think, talking about the Dutch situation now, is that in the last couple of decades, farmers have been creating distance from other people, stakeholders, but also tourists, for example, from their farms, because they didn't want to have any hygiene risks or food security or criticism, to just focus doing that. So if you don't know what's happening there, you will definitely have the wrong opinion. So now if you create more agritourism, there will be much more understanding, which is a value which you don't get paid for usually, but helps the sector in general. If every farm would do that, it would help the sector, and people might be different in supermarkets rewarding that. Then on the other side, if you create activities next to your food production which facilitates tourism, you get extra income. So it's not just depending on the income of tourism, but you have this great setting of a farm, but then the value needs to turn into euro. So you program activity, or you sell local milk or apple pie or whatever. So you have a little bit of extra income. And if you do that in the region, it will make it stronger. So more different ways of income makes it more robust. It also helps you as a region to be branded better. So this is really strengthening the region. The other question was about sustainability, right? Sustainable practices. I think agritourism can be carrier of success stories and dilemmas of sustainable farming, and brings a stakeholder who is not used to come on a farm, or for the farmer not used to meet or talk to, onto this farm, which is very valuable. So it brings maybe new ideas. It makes sure that the success story travel, because the way that farmers amongst each other share that is very limited. And the way farmers unions, for example, do that is also very limited. Agritourism brings new dynamic on a farm, new ways of communicating, like you do yourself. I hardly see a lot of farmers do what you do, because a lot of farmers don't communicate about themselves. The other side, I think a lot of farmers would see it as criticism and rather don't receive people, because they might ask difficult questions. But yeah, I think it creates a lot of transparency in the end, making sure that people understand the sustainability challenges and making sure that the next time somebody comes as a tourist, the farmer will think, I want to been doing better, so I'll take some measurements on sustainability.
Yeah, interesting. Good to see that agritourism has a way of developing the region and also contributing to sustainable practices. The last question I have is, can you tell me more about Eye for Nature? What inspired you to start Eye for Nature? What is your goal for it? And what do you hope to achieve with Eye for Nature?
The start of Eye for Nature was a little bit a necessity. I worked for the Ministry of Agriculture, where I was asked by the minister to set up a youth program with the goal to engage young people when terms as sustainability and climate change weren't as popular or secured yet in the minds of people or young people, but also how to connect that dynamic and this fast changing world with companies who are having challenges. And that's what I'm actually still doing with Eye for Nature, but I only started doing it for my own organization because I was very young at that stage, apparently. And because at the ministry, they had to shrink in the amount of civil servants, so formal rules were last in, first out. So I was young, so I was asked to leave, and I really didn't want to leave, but I was really, really enjoying what I was doing. So I made the choice to make my own organization, and the purpose was for that to keep doing what I was doing because I was enjoying that so much. So what Eye for Nature is doing is still a lot like the program at the ministry. So work to see how you can work together with all these organizations. That's why we became a cooperative, because I personally don't want to work alone, but I think cooperation, this community needs to be built. And in a cooperative, you make that formal to work on a goal. And that goal is to work on natural challenges. So the challenges around climate change, sustainability, all sectors are affected by the threats that nature has or the change that nature has. But we also want to focus on the solution that nature offers. So nature has thousands of years of experience to thrive and to adapt. And I think we don't take a lot of that into the practice, what we do need to do for solution. And one of the elements I've become fond of, and which as Eye for Nature has a little bit of their signature, is that everybody engages. Everything engages in nature. So if you look at the potential that's there, I think we should engage everybody. And one of the groups that is being left aside all the time is young people, because of the dynamic I shared before, because of the past we are used to, okay, you have to grow old to experience and then you are able to be in the driver's seat, to be taken serious. And in a world that's changing so fast, this paradigm is changing. So we need to engage young people, in a sense, everybody. So I believe that we need to change that, also personally driven, because I have the experience that when I was in education, people were not looking at what I needed to learn or what I could contribute, what talent I had. And I was more working on, okay, I need to adapt to be just like the rest, to copy like the rest. I call that camouflage, and not camouflage, which means that you show your own colors, your own talents, and step into the world like that. So what I want to achieve is to build a world that's more like nature, that adapts to something that everybody and everything contributes, that young people don't have to copy what older people do, but can participate and be taken seriously from an early age on. And that big organizations embrace that by, for example, we want that every organization has a young board, so a mechanism that young people are included in the decision-making process, from a government, from a company, from a national corporation. So that's why we, for example, set up young boards, World Food Forum chapters, national youth boards, etc. I think a very important thing. And in the end, when that happens, young people, I believe nowadays, they think as sustainable thinking, sustainable working, nature inclusive working as a natural process. And it's not something, oh, you have to do this.
Yeah.
Next to that, we have our own jobs. No, it's the new normal, we would say. I see this transformational process like nature transforms, that we have young people participate in all these processes where companies and governments are working in, as it is normal to be in education, doing great projects with companies and not just sitting in class to hear what you need to do to be successful.
Exactly. Eye for Nature is doing a lot from what I've seen so far. Eye for Nature is trying to bring together these different practices and ideas to promote sustainability and also to onboard youth to do something for themselves. As you said, not a camouflage. You have to show your true value, you have to show your true color, and that's what makes you unique. So at this point, what advice do you have for the young people who are willing to share their stories, raise their voices against a particular thing, and also who are looking forward to become leaders? What advice do you have for young people like this? Generally, not just in the agricultural sector, but general aspect of leadership for young people. What advice can you give them on the best practices to go about it?
The best practice and advice for that, I think, is suitable to achieve that is to be sensible for your surroundings. Like we said, you have to be aware a little bit what's going on around you. Also challenge your assumptions in that, especially with social media. Not everything you see is true or works the way you think it works. So be sensitive of your surroundings. With that sensitivity, start acting. Rome was not built in one day. And in Dutch, you would say also there's a lot of roads how you can come to Rome. But it all is about taking steps. And steps doesn't mean to have giant leaps, but it can be small steps. So start with small steps. And maybe you can take a big one after, but the other way around is very challenging. I think it's a paradigm in this world that everybody advises to make, from an idea to business plan and you want to be a millionaire or whatever. But make an idea every day that you think, oh, I can call that person, I can write that email, or I can do something small that brings you further to that big idea that gives you a success experience for yourself and for others. I think that's the best thing. And don't let you be dazzled by big mentorships or whatever, because the knowledge and the road to the solution, 9 of 10 times you already have it in your head, only you're afraid or there's something holding you back doing it. So make it small and digestible, we would say, and start acting a little bit tomorrow. And don't be withheld by the paradigm of, okay, but I have to deal with older people, they know more than me or are better than me. No, everybody's equal and contributes in a different way. Be a little bit bold maybe as a young person to step up and take your own space to do that. But
initially you mentioned something about a self-development and skill acquisition, and that really struck me because you mentioned that young people should not just sit down and expect that something will happen out of the blues, like you'll be called upon to take up a leadership role. You have to keep developing yourself, getting the necessary skills that prepares you into this sector of life. So I totally agree with you in that aspect, because this is also a pathway to leading us into greatness and giving us the opportunity to take up a leadership role. Yeah.
I like to use metaphors because it helps me, but also in general to make things clear. So if you would put it in the metaphor, okay, I can't swim. I would love to swim, but I don't know how. Everybody wants to swim in the big sea or the big lake, whatever. Nobody wants to swim in a small puddle or whatever. So the anxiousness of creating your big ambition into reality is, for example, wanting to swim in the big sea. Nobody jumps in the sea and purposely starts to drown. I think 99.9%. If you have the guts to jump into the sea, you will immediately start trying to float or swim. And if you start doing that, usually if there's people around, they start to help you. So don't be afraid to jump into a lake, metaphorically, and you will trust your gut feeling that you will come up with something that you can do to make the next step. So what implicitly I would also like to say, it's not just going to Wageningen University that will bring you to your success. Going to a low grades or practical school or even self-taught school would also bring success.
This is true, because some people are being held back because of this same notion, because they believe that they don't measure up to the world standard. Some will see it as a setback that they didn't go to a top-ranked university or they didn't have luxury kind of education, and they kind of feel that they don't measure up. And it's really nice that you mentioned it, because good a thing that they have platforms for self-learning like Coursera, Udemy, even on YouTube. People can also learn things on YouTube. So those kind of personal development is also a plus to taking someone to the next level. I want to thank you for mentioning this part, because from the few interactions I've had with young people, this is one of the major setback they always feel, and that's make them have this kind of low self-esteem because they didn't have their education up to a certain level or from a certain university.
Yeah,
So thank you so much for mentioning that. And I
you're
also want
welcome.
to use this opportunity to say thank you for your hospitality. It's been lovely here in the farm with your family. Thank you for the reception. This I really appreciate.
Thank you.
So,
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much.
okay, thank you. So this is all about Mr. Zander. There is a lot we can learn from him. He has a couple of engagements in different organizations like the World Food Forum. He's also involved in the food labs, and with what you have heard from him, the Eye for Nature, he is a resourceful person to get ideas and advice on best practices, also an expert in the dairy farming. So there is a lot to learn from him, and I'm really happy to have met him. And I hope you also enjoyed this interview. So do well to subscribe to our channel and also invite your friends to do so. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.